Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Novel Therapy. I'm Kate Fennessy, aspiring author and social media marketer.
And I'm New York Times bestselling author Helen Brown. I got it right.
Very good. And we've got a special guest today.
We do. It's so exciting.
It is very exciting. It's our first ever podcast guest. So Helen, would you like to introduce Tara?
Swamba. You've got something to...
Hello.
Yes.
This is my voice, just so you know.
We've got a very exciting topic to discuss today, which is around fearlessness in writing, and I think Tara is a supreme example in that, and we can talk about that very shortly.
Oh, thank you, Helen.
Yes.
It's very kind.
And even though you're the first guest, you're already such the best guest because she's helped with technical advice, setting up the camera.
And Jona's fallen in love with her.
Jonah was just getting so into that purring massage session.
And we've got such a wide range of listeners now. Some people have said to you, Kate, haven't they, who is Jonah?
Yeah,
and
some
I think
people didn't know. We forgot to mention
cat.
it as a cat. So I think in episode 1, if you didn't, she thought it was a child. It was just some strange human that we didn't really ever talk to, but talked about.
No, well, he's the official receptionist in our clinic, and he's also our butler.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's also some sort of a soothsayer. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
He's some sort of source of wisdom just
Well, he
permeating
does.
out of him.
Oh, yeah, and a heat pack, I think, as well.
A heat pack.
Yeah.
Comes well for that in the winter.
But he's very picky, Tara, and that's why
Yeah.
it was such a compliment that he sat on your lap and
I
let you
know.
stroke his
That was pretty
chin.
amazing.
It was very beautiful.
And as we know, last week Jonah knocked over Helen's mic, probably deliberately. Let's be honest.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Do you take up most of the space in the relationship?
No, he does. I'm
Yeah.
completely submissive to his desires.
Exactly. I think it was an attention-grabbing exercise.
So it sounded terrible. It sounded like I was in a hailstorm.
It was pretty funny. But I don't know if you can see on the video, but we do have a really nice, solid new mic stands.
We
We're
do.
very excited. No blizzards in this episode, hopefully.
Mm.
So what we'll do is we'll start up with our checkup, which is our, pre-clinic, just how's things going moment. So I guess maybe we should start with you, Helen, and we can move along and we can check up.
I thought I was the therapist, really, so I don't have any problems at all.
What have you been up to?
Well, you know how we've got a jar that we put cliche words in?
Yes.
Well, I have had a mental jar this week of cliche encounters with strangers. I'm refusing to have cliche encounters with strangers. I think everyone's got so hooked into their phones that they're not conscious, and we're having to teach people to react and communicate with us. So without being creepy, and if people really don't want to talk to me, that's fine. But I've taken conversations just that little bit further, like a guy who's doing some painting. I said, what have you been doing lately? He said, I went to Bali. So I thought, I said, you must have had a lovely time. He said, well, actually, I went for dental treatment. and apparently the waiting room in Bali was just full of Australians because it was a fraction of the price in Australia. And then I met another woman who told me why she and none of her 3 siblings were ever going to have kids. She was in her late 30s.
Okay.
I mean, this is very good training as a writer because it helps you with character development. No person is ever just a cardboard cutout.
Yeah.
And they're all out there desperate to tell you their stories. Well, most of them. Some of them aren't, and some of them you don't want to know their stories.
You're so right, because I found the same thing in just highlighting our 3 words. Here's our journey jar for our YouTube viewers. The 3 words that are on the banned list currently are journey, amazing, and lovely. And it's honestly been so good, Helen, just to remind yourself, to wake your brain up a bit, get your brain motoring again, think about what you're saying a bit more.
Yeah.
Someone shared a quote in our Facebook group, which we'll mention later, but and I went to say that's lovely, and then I went, no, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Much better choice of word.
And
we've
we've had such fabulous feedback. And one of the suggestions was that we add awesome to the jar.
Yeah, we've had it.
And I'm happy to do that.
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Yes. I might quickly jump in with my update, and then we'll throw to yours if you like, Tara, as well, what you've been up to. But basically, I just want to shout out to, this is very dorky of me, but I'm obsessed currently with Portrait Artist of the Year. Does anyone watch that? It's I'm not in the right demographic.
No, you're not.
No, but I love it. It's watching artists paint portraits. It's a competition.
Isn't that afternoon television?
Yeah, I love it. I really, really love it. It's on Tuesday nights on Foxtel, and
It's night time.
yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I know it's really dorky, but I really enjoy it. I just love watching artists because I can't paint for anything. Like I can't draw, so I just find it. But it's a similar process to what we're talking about.
Very
and I
much.
love watching their different approaches. Some of them get really formulaic and do a grid and they draw it very carefully. Others just slap the paint on and go wild. Some of them do two in the allotted 4-hour period. I just love watching their different approaches, and I know it's really dorky of me, but that's my current obsession. What about you, Tara? What have you been
I don't
lately?
think the program's dorky, but I think maybe just having Foxtel is the marriage generation barrier.
You know what that is? That is an inheritance. That is, I got it in my divorce. I'm not even kidding. And every time I try and break up with Foxtel, they give me a ridiculously good offer.
No.
But I know you're so right.
They'll never let you leave.
Thank you so much for shining this truth into my face. I'm ashamed.
That's the only way. I just have no idea what that is.
I love it. This is what happens when you have 20-year-old guests.
So what are you watching on Foxtel?
No, Netflix.
Oh, Netflix.
Well,
yeah.
So
I
what are you
watch
watching on
Netflix.
I
Netflix?
am obsessed with David Chang's new show, Ugly Delicious.
Oh,
Have you
no,
seen it?
I haven't.
Oh, it's amazing. So it's like his big thing is that he does a lot of like fusion foods. So he comes from a Korean background.
Cool.
And they made this really traditional noodle bar and it did poorly and he wasn't getting anyone through the door. And he thought like, stuff this, and then just started making all different kinds of really crazy Korean American mixed food. And his like noodle bar went nuts. People loved it because they'd never experienced it before. Yeah, so the TV show is him exploring like fusion food and migration and how like the two really blend in together. And I just never really think about food as an art form. But after watching the show, I was like, oh my God, it's just another way that we express and connect with each other. So it's really good.
And I wonder if we can apply that to writing too, you know, throwing in crazy ideas. I love that poetry's coming back because people's attention spans have shrunk.
Yeah.
So
true.
Yeah.
I follow a poet on Instagram, not Instagram, Facebook. Actually, I follow a poet on Instagram too. Yeah, it's a new interesting way for poetry to come into the mix. Very interesting. I feel very ashamed about Foxtel. I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to put it on my to-do list. I do watch Netflix, so I just want you to know that.
No, it's just strange. I forget that Foxtel is a thing for me.
So
like my parents have it, and I'm always like, "Why do you have it?"
All right, I feel like we need to open the clinic. So
Okay.
I'm going to let Helen tell the story of.
All right, of how I met Tara. Yes. I feel I really want you to meet Tara because last week we spoke about sending out naked emotional selfies of ourselves, and you were feeling very nervous about sharing very personal aspects of your story.
Correct. Yeah.
And I thought that was it's an inhibiting factor.
Right.
And I think every writer has it. But anyway, one morning I was across the road at Teaspoon where I have my coffees and Tara, in between being a nearly qualified lawyer.
Yeah, almost,
is a fantastic barista over there, soon to become a barrister, I'm sure.
Brilliant.
Anyway, I was sitting drinking my takeaway coffee on the stool where sometimes you're allowed to sit with your takeaway coffee, and I heard this amazing story unfolding, and it was Tara's voice reading to another one of the bar staff. Is that what you call
my
it?
friend Alice, I'd been like talking to her about it and she really wanted to hear it.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, I'll read you what I felt so far.
My God, this is Hannah Gadsby on speed. This young woman is fearless, and the story she's willing to put out to the public is going to be so helpful for all of us and healing, and to understand what the next generation of writers is bringing. And so, and then I invited Tara over here to the house and we had a bit of a chat. And she told me the story of why she decided to become a lawyer from her very early childhood memories, and I thought if you're willing to share that, we'd start with that.
Well, that's a very, I go for a lot of interviews because I've just started, and they always ask me in the interview, like, why did you want to become a lawyer? And I find that really difficult to answer to complete strangers.
Yeah.
So I normally like lie or say things that are true, but it's not my main motivating factor.
You can't lie in this clinic.
No.
Exactly.
Yes,
Will
yeah.
come and arrest
Well,
you.
I think most people get into law. A person much smarter than me told me for 2 reasons. One,
The BMW.
we want money and stability, and our parents were lawyers, and that's
Yeah.
a lot of people continue those
Yeah.
traditions. And then the other reason was that people have experienced injustice in their lives,
Okay.
and they're motivated because they want to see the world shaped as a more fair place. So when I was a kid, I grew up in a village environment
In
and-
Bali.
in Bali, yeah.
On the main.
So I grew up in Sanur, which is in the southeast
Yeah.
of Bali.
That's quite touristy, isn't it?
It's a lot of Europeans tend to go there. It's much slower. It's not like Kuta or Legian where there's a lot of international development and stuff.
Yeah.
It's way
Bit more
slower.
authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my village is about 10 minutes inland from the coast.
Okay.
And I lived with my aunt and uncle mostly, but my mum and my dad were there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this memory, and I must have only been about 3 years old. And we have banjars, which are our temples or our community-based homes.
Mm.
And I remember hearing this gong being rung, and my older cousins were all flocking in, and it was pouring down with rain. And before I knew it, my older brother, who's about 3 years older than me, grabbed my wrist, and we're running through this crowd and pushing to get in the front.
Mm-hmm.
And we're standing at the front of this giant circle, and in the middle is this man, and he's holding a television, and the crowd stone him to death. It's a very troublesome scene when you're young.
Wow.
And you just see him sort of die, then the crowd just evaporates, and we went back to where we were staying. And I remember that memory being pretty rough and hard to see.
How old were you? Sorry, Tara.
3?
You were 3.
Yeah, I was really, really young. But and then I think I developed this thing where I wanted to help people lots. And whenever people asked me what I wanted to be, I would say a doctor. But then as I got a little bit older, I realized that it wasn't really medicine that could have saved him. It would have been it's just a really cruel way to kind of execute justice. So the idea was that he'd stolen this television from the local church, and the village mentality was that. So I saw that to be,
So this is how
incredibly unfair.
it's a bit personal, but how long ago is this? 20 years ago? 25
It would have
years
been,
ago?
it would have been 25 years ago. But it took a long time for me to even realize how, I knew that had sort of happened, but then as I grew older, I wasn't sure if it was a dream. So when I went back to Bali this time last year, I spoke to my cousin about it. I was I remember this story, and they have a very different attitude to death and justice as we do from a Western lens. And I remember asking my cousin what happened, and he was he didn't actually steal it from the church. He was a bookie, and this guy owed him money, so he went to his house to follow up on the money. And then he said, I'll take your TV until you can pay me back what you owe me from the gambling.
Okay.
And then he ran out onto the street and said, this guy's stealing my television, help. And then the man holding the TV panicked, and he started running, and then people stopped him, and then they stoned him. And
so he wasn't actually even doing anything
no,
wrong.
and I remember my cousin
Wow.
telling me, and
That's
then
even worse.
I was this is worse.
Yeah.
This is way worse.
That is intense.
Yeah, so I think it's growing up in that, it's reflective of, I guess, the justice climate that we have at the moment. I feel with so much misinformation, and we see the way that misinformation shapes our society, politically, socially. So I think that those are big motivating factors for me to stay within our legal system.
Because you do hear about things happening like this even now, don't you, in communities where some mad stories spread through phones and people decide to go and execute somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's echoed in so many things, like the way that we do, I don't know, it's like guerrilla justice almost, where people post things on social media and then that you watch that spread and then
cancel
people
culture. It's
Yeah.
a similar
Oh,
attitude.
I
this
hate that
Helen,
idea.
that, you know, there was a feud recently between two YouTubers in the beauty, I think it was the beauty industry YouTube world, and they, you know, they've got huge profiles and everything's dependent on their audience size and their, I guess, popularity. That's how they're selling and existing and earning a living. And when they have a feud, sometimes it becomes public. One person calls out the other and says to all their fans, which become an army, go and hate this person, go and unsubscribe, go and destroy them. So people can get destroyed now.
Yeah.
It's called cancel culture. People get cancelled, and it's incredibly terrifying. I mean, I imagine it would just be...
I think it's one of those things on all fronts where it's just a really ineffective way to deal with problems.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I love storytelling so much, because you can create multi-dimensional people, and I really enjoy combating this idea that there are like bad or good people, because it's just not true. Everyone is capable of doing like positive or negative behaviors, and we all have our own demons in the way that we're shaped. And the idea that someone can do something wrong or have an impact and not understand, and then their whole art, everything about them is cancelled, and as well the person who is like wronged initially doesn't get any closure around that, and most of the time they also end up feeling alienated. It's just I just think it's ineffective is probably the best way
absolutely.
for me to describe things like that.
This is a very pivotal part of who you are, but this isn't what you were telling your co-worker about that day.
No.
This is another element of your story that I'd love you to share with us today.
Yeah. So the story...
Because you're quite a high-born Balinese girl, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. So the way that it kind of works in Bali is that you follow the male line. So the bloodline is inherited from your father.
Right.
And my dad's family are part of like it's called Manawaba, which is like this part of the high caste. So the way that the story is told is that there's a high priest who like saves Bali, and he has 4 wives, and one of the wives is Manawaba. So my dad's family line can be traced to that initial
original 4
wife.
wives.
Yeah, and that's how you get the caste system. So you have like high caste Balinese people, which are originate from that line, and then you have like the lower caste underneath.
It's like a royalty type of system.
Yeah, it is. You have certain responsibilities culturally. You're like the cultural gatekeepers. And I think when I was younger, I found it really oppressive. But as I've aged, I've become more appreciative of it, because it keeps your culture like a central part of your identity.
Okay.
So when tourists come, when we have so much tourism in Bali,
Of course.
we can remain largely unaffected, or our culture can still remain quite strong.
Protected by those traditions.
Because it's such a big part of who you are.
Okay.
But yeah, it is also pretty oppressive in some ways, especially for women, because you can't, like, there's a lot of pressure to marry another high caste man to keep your bloodline and to have high caste children. And like, they say it's changing, but I think that it's not really.
Okay.
Like, there's a lot of expectations that come with it.
So how's the pressure been exerted on you personally?
Well, this may surprise people. No, I mean, like, if you look at the YouTube video, you'll probably tell, but I'm very queer. So
you're very gorgeous.
She's very gorgeous, and her skin is beautiful, and I'm one. Her skin is beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm feeling very white because it's been winter here for 6 years now, I think.
Yeah. Yes, we're in our seventh. Yeah,
so I think the idea was that I had these two really conflicting parts of myself.
Almost the absolute opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, where I think to be inherently queer nowadays is to do a lot of deconstructing. We, like the queer community, deconstruct gender constantly and sexuality, and then when it comes to this concept of race, I found race to be much more rigid because we have these like genetic markers.
Yep, and
so
that's
it's
it.
yeah, so it's difficult to be someone who is mixed race living in like a white society.
Because your mum's Australian?
Yeah, she's
Your
Australian
dad's
and
Balinese.
and he's Balinese.
Right, yeah.
So I have all of the cultural responsibilities coming from my dad,
Right.
and my mum, they divorced when I was quite young, and my mum isn't really involved with that in any way. So it's strange to live in this duality, and I lived between my mum and my dad's place.
Okay.
So growing up,
But did that feel like two different cultures? Like,
yeah, it was
very.
it was a very two very different parenting styles.
wow.
Like different ideologies. So you're raised like being like a good Balinese girl, like in one hand, and then being like a rebellious like Australian teenager, you know, on the other. And then, but throughout both of these experiences, I was like very queer. I have been for a really long time.
So
like,
when did you realise you were queer?
Oh God.
Because you wanted, did you wanted lesbian Barbies?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Did you make them smooch?
All the time. All the time. Yeah, I remember being in kindergarten, and I had this one boy who was obsessed with me, who used to call me Cupcake, and I would burst into tears.
Aww.
I hated him.
See, I would have loved that. My little girl.
Yeah. My mum would be like, it's a good thing. It's a cute name.
It's a cute,
yeah, and I remember he
like
kissed me and I like lost it.
Yeah,
I hated him.
Yeah.
So yeah, from a very young age.
Yeah, you were not a cupcake.
Yeah, so I think that was a really difficult for me to kind of come to terms with, is how I dealt with kind of the pressures of being in that, I guess, like that type of Balinese person.
Yeah.
And with wanting to have my autonomy, but also like respecting, it was a lot. There was so much going on. So in this story that Helen overheard, I basically talked about how I couldn't really process it when I was young. So I didn't want to be Balinese. I just wanted to be white.
Okay.
And I kind of probably shamed and like pushed aside that part of who I was. And then lived a very happy life, but could never really assimilate into white culture seamlessly because I'm not white. So people would be like, where are you from? And I was very ashamed of coming from that like village background.
Wow.
People don't, I think I was always nervous that people wouldn't really understand.
Or accept.
And then as I got older, kind of reconnecting with my Balinese side, and then I was like, okay, well, part of me feels accepted and is validated and loves this culture, but at all points in time that is going to be naturally conflicting with my like queer identity. And how do I be like a queer Balinese woman?
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any role models. And
it's almost so specific, isn't it? Your particular cards that you were given are very, you know, the mixed race thing, and then the sexuality, and then the line of your family, and plus having been born in Bali and then moving to Australia, there's a lot of elements there.
Yeah, I don't
know.
I don't really know.
Met anyone with the same.
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah.
And I think I used to be very afraid of that, of feeling like I was walking this path alone that no one else has really done before.
Do you know what's funny? Because as soon as I see it, and having met you, it's fabulous. Like, it's so interesting. Like, how unique and wonderful to have that set of interesting things. But when you're a kid,
that's part
it's
of Tara's
terrifying.
strength, though, because she's done so much, as they would say, work on getting to this point. You know, it's very admirable.
Yeah, it was hard, and it's hard as well to face up to. I guess, like the shame that you put on yourself and how you let that fear feed, and feeling like you can claim back, you know, that autonomy around being afraid of aspects of who you are and accepting who you are as a whole thing, and being like, okay, well, I don't actually have to make these two parts completely chill with each other. Occasionally they're going to flare up.
There.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Yep.
I think I was always kind of hung up on typical like A-type law student. Like, I wanted to know how to do it right. Like, I
Okay.
wanted to know how to navigate these things properly. So I was like looking for mentors and looking for ways that I could navigate it. But no one's story is exactly the same
No,
as your own.
Of course.
And when you start to make peace with the fact that there's no wrong or right way to do your own identity and who you are, I could really relax into it. And all of that, like, shame and fear kind of melted away because I don't have to worry about it. But it's still, I say that, but I still haven't talked to my dad about being queer.
Okay.
He's like pretty chill about some things,
Yeah.
but it's a difficult thing to talk about. And I think even just in Asian culture in general, like, my dad would be like, why are you telling me about your dating life or your sex life? Like, I don't need to know about it. So it's hard. I've tried so many times to have that conversation, but I think he's not there yet.
Maybe he doesn't need to hear it. Maybe it's not about sex. Maybe it's about love, you know. And love
and happiness.
Is a very broad thing. When we spoke last time, you told me you're still feeling under a bit of pressure to marry a prince from Ubud.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah.
Yes.
How like, yeah, I like had this really lovely trip where I did my like kind of like a pilgrimage where you go to every big temple and you pray, and I was feeling really like into my Balinese self and I was loving it. And then sort of 2 days before I went, I spent a month with my family. Sort of 2 days before I went back, my stepmom was like, maybe it's time that you thought about marriage. And I was like,
Wow.
what are you not reading here?
Is this your
Like,
father's wife?
Yeah.
So you reckon she would know deep down?
I don't know. It's always so hard with these things. I think as well, some people say that a lot of Asian cultures see like same-sex relationships as good practice or training tools for marriage, or like they don't really view marriage as like a romantic thing. Yeah, I think it's like a normal
they
part
don't
of
view
growing
marriage
up.
as a romantic thing. That
No,
makes sense. It's
it's
more a partnership.
Yeah, it's like a union between two families, or
Right.
like a economic arrangement.
Okay.
So here we have a very individualist society where we also have like pension and things like that, and everyone works for themselves, and then your kids leave, and then you work, and then you save up, and you retire, and you retire on the money that you've made. That Asian system is very much like you will never, like, you don't leave home. You live with your parents and your grandparents. If you're a woman, you're moving to the husband's house,
Yeah, with his
and
parents.
and then you earn, and then you support your parents and you support your children, and then when you get older, your children
happens to
support.
you.
Yeah, and
It's
being
a totally different
being
system.
queer like totally ruins that.
Mm.
Like
Okay.
that,
So what
that
did you
network.
What did you say to your stepmother?
I just told her I was never going to get married.
That was courageous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just said I'm not. Just don't think that's for me. And she said, "Are you sure? It's good. You can help each other out." And I was like, "Well, I just don't think I want to do it. I want to do that." And she was really like, "I was the same at your age," and I was like, "Oh wow, that's a whole different. If you
Yeah.
were, that's a whole different conversation."
Would
Yeah.
you consider marrying a woman? I mean, is it?
Yes, I have this really like beautiful daydream of like just going with like a female partner and being like, we're getting married, because it's never been an
It's
issue.
lovely to have a beautiful daydream.
Yeah, and then just being like, if I'm really your princess, I can do whatever I want, like really
Exactly. You
like
can be the
Roman
rebel
Empire in
princess,
it. Yeah.
rebel wife, and
Yeah.
just change, tweak that little system a bit.
Well, none of the scriptures that we have say that you can't do that.
I like it. I'm all for it.
Yeah. So I guess I would probably do it. So I mean, it's obviously a lot of pressure to put on a partner. Let's go liberate some people, but I don't know. I think I'm gonna try and do it anyway and just see what happens.
Yeah, the right partner won't see this pressure.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
what you're doing is so valuable because it educates our generations. You know, I don't know how many generations down you are from me, but you're a different generation from Kate, and you're a different generation from Hannah Gadsby, you know.
Yeah.
And somehow or other, I know there's hurt, and I know there must be rage involved in dealing with the things that you've dealt with. But it seems to me your generation may be equipped to rise above the rage,
Yeah.
educate us and get into your own power, which would, I love that.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted you to come on
Yeah,
today.
I'm
thank you.
feeling brave just
Yeah.
by hearing this story,
Yes.
honestly.
So what are you going to be writing about? Do you feel afraid?
Yeah, look, my thing to be the way you said that, when people ask you why did you become a lawyer, and you've got that choice, you can lie, you can fudge it or pick a part of the truth. I mean, a big story of mine is my mother killed herself when I was 21 years old, and I related to when you said that because I used to have that little period where I'd guess, would I lie? Do I say? One day I thought maybe I'll just say she had cancer, but I thought I can't lie. Then they'll say, what cancer? And I'll be like, I don't know. Like, I've been in that place where I felt shame about her death, and I hated what it meant people might have thought about my family, myself. So that's probably my brave story. I'm actually not putting Mum's death in my novel. I've done that thing we talked about last week, Helen, of the gushy write for yourself thing. I actually did it early on with my sister, who is currently writing about Mum's death. Mum died coming up for 20 years ago, so it's a long time ago now. So my sister Jane is writing about Mum's death, but early on I wrote about it in a really, I don't even know, it's traumatic for me to even remember writing about it back then. But I guess I'm not ready to write about Mum's death. This book, this novel that I'm attempting is, in my more recent life where I got married at 30. At 29, I was very keen on, because I was a single mum, and I was very keen on suddenly having like the norm. It's like what you talked about. I didn't want to be the girl whose mum has committed suicide. I'd become a young mother, a single mother by 25, and I didn't like it either. I didn't like that I didn't fit in at the inner city school where my daughter was. I was a misfit. I had an old car. I was single. I had a dead mum. I didn't like it. And so I wanted so desperately this husband to suddenly make me look normal. Yeah. And I wanted to give a sibling to Emmy. I think that was a bit, what's that word? Like, I think that was a natural drive as well. Hormonal, or whatever the word is. Yes, but I would say that what I'm exploring in this novel is the fact that the man I chose to marry ended up being a fraud. He was not who he presented himself to be. He was cheating on me the whole time throughout the marriage, but I only found out at the end. So I was with him for 8 years, trying desperately to cobble together a normal life that looked normal on the outside, so that those scars, that shame, I could project. I don't even know why I cared, but I wanted to stand at the gates of Ripponlea Primary and fit in.
Maybe that's, occasionally ideas for titles come up. That could be one, A Normal Life.
It's what I wanted,
What is a
Ripponlea Primary? That's your...
But the ridiculous thing is, why did I even care about those women at Ripponlea Primary? But anyway, that's I guess so. I'm not writing about Mum's death because it's still, that's a whole separate topic for me, and what I'm just doing in this novel is focusing on this last probably 5 years of my life where you got into the wrong relationship for the wrong reasons. It'd be like if you married your prince from a bud. It's going to unravel. That relationship unravels.
For research reasons.
Maybe I could.
Exactly.
I thought about it before. I was like, I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to work.
You marry your princess.
Yeah.
We'll all move to a bud. Helen, you can't. Anyway.
But you'd get a great. That could be a movie, couldn't it?
Oh look, and that's the thing. For me, so unpacking this last chapter of why I ended up marrying a man who totally cheated on me, it's related to Mum's death, and it's related to that desire to fit in.
Yeah, totally.
So in unpacking that, almost because Mum's death is so big and overwhelming, I'm not ready to do that now. I think with her 20-year anniversary coming up, and the fact that my sister's writing about it, and we're going to interview her soon. When I read Jane's first few chapters, I have not cried like that. I sent her a photo, an emotional selfie, not a nude one, of just the tears, because that's still very deep inside. And for her to just tell the story very simply from her point of view, that's enough for me right now, even just on that. Do you know what I mean? Just to read that and support her. And for me to focus on this story, I'm a 40-year-old woman, so I'm trying to focus on when a woman in this case goes down the wrong track and gets hurt and rises above it. So I'm just trying to focus on one thing, which is, you found yourself in a shitty situation, you got really hurt, but you're actually going to be better off. Because in the end, I don't want it to be cliche, but I want this woman to get on the right track through being pummeled and being hurt and being on the wrong track. Does that make sense?
I don't think we've once used the word journey, have we?
I hope not.
I don't think so. Or amazing.
Good.
So it's been a really meaningful exchange. Really.
Yeah.
And Tara, are you going to put yours into a book someday? Or are you
I definitely will. I just haven't. It's been hard to. I think I'd like to explore a different medium for a little while.
Yeah, well, there are just so many different outlets.
Yeah, I want to play around with like visual landscapes,
go for it.
And then like how you move through a visual landscape in kind of like an interactive way.
Because it's very difficult to encourage anyone to become a writer, because in Australia the average income for a writer is just over $13,000 a year. That's 1-3, and it's pretty much the same in the US and the UK. So it's not really a career move, but it can be part of a mosaic. I keep kicking the table, sorry. Of a mosaic of your career or who you are. You know.
Yeah, I think that I'll definitely. I mean, I love words.
Me too, but I love people and I love life stories.
We've all said that this morning, having a cup of tea. Like, we all love stories, and I think hearing your story has made me feel strong enough to even tell that story, which I'm not used to telling that. Even just what I just said, that's still new for me.
Well, it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
I think the uncomfortable thing as well is like you acknowledge that, you know, like this pain, which happened like a long time ago now, you probably feel like you couldn't feel that anymore, you wanted to move past it. So maybe getting into a stressful relationship meant that you could still process those emotions because you were in a stressful relationship, but without addressing like the underlying thing.
Yeah, and I can see that a lot in, I can see that response to grief when I think broadly of mum and how the fallout affected a lot of my family.
Yeah, because it's easier to say like, it's this thing that I can see and that's tangible in front of me, instead of like, it's a thing that I can't have any control over or change, and I just have to sit in the uncomfortability of that like pain. It's hard, like I don't know anyone who's ever been able to really just like sit with that uncomfortability.
No, it's human nature.
Okay,
we don't like it. We don't like feeling uncomfortable. And you're right, I was so focused in that 8-year relationship I wanted to push mum's death under the carpet. I waned to...
The trouble is you can't do that because these things boil up, don't they? And you can get sick or you end up having to confront it.
Yeah, that's it. But I think that thing that you talked about identity and shame, I really relate to that. And obviously it's a very different story, but it's very much part of it, isn't it? And that ability to own your story and tell it is so important.
Yeah, I've had a friend who lost her mum at a young age, and I remember her saying to me like, I just don't want to be someone with a dead mum. You know, when I talk to people about it, it's just like the obvious thing that I'd have issues from there, but I'm like way more complicated than that. Like, I don't want to be that person. Yeah. And I was a bit like, you've actually never talked about it or confronted it because you don't want to be like a trope or something. Yeah, and I think that's really difficult too. Yeah. Because maybe the way that it's represented in the media doesn't represent you or your experience. So then you're like, oh, well, I'm not this like what's the word? Like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
like a trope or
exactly.
I'm not this sad character.
Yeah, symbol. Yeah.
Do you know what I think it was years ago when I used to watch crap TV? I still watch crap TV. I was watching early seasons of what is it? What's the singing one?
Australian Idol.
Australian Idol. Sorry,
with the chairs.
I'm sure it was Australian Idol, or maybe it was The Voice. Who knows? Well, it was one of those shows. I remember they did, you know how they do their formulaic thing, which is find a person with a story, put her on stage. They found this person with her story, and her story was that her mum killed herself too. And I thought, God, and I hated watching it because I thought, God, is that what I look like? Is that what someone would grab of me, a producer, and go, Kate, let's tell the sad story of your life imploding. It's like, it's that same thing that your friend was saying, not wanting to be just that. Yes, it's part of my story, but and I hated it. I remember just watching that thinking, gross. I don't ever want to be that girl.
You know, sometimes this sort of stuff can propel you forwards though, because I remember after my son Sam died in 1983, living in Wellington, which by comparison to Melbourne is a relatively small town, and I was trying to deal with this trauma, and everywhere I went, people would either burst into tears in front of me or say, I know what you're feeling. And everywhere I went, I was the grieving mother, and I thought, I'm so much more, and it actually gave me the push to leave Wellington and go to Auckland and start a new life and take a job on a newspaper, a full-time job. So, you can use all that.
I relate to that too.
Energy.
And we talked about that in episode 1. We talked about the why of writing. And I think in various ways it came out in both our stories, that desire to push you forward into a new chapter of your own life, or a desire to own your story, and for me, this novel, like I said, it's one element, and it's where I'm at right now, because to be honest, what happened with my marriage was bloody devastating, and I was really hurt on top of carrying old hurt. So I'm processing that now, because that's what I'm ready to do. But it is that thing of, in doing that, I'm somehow pushing through to the next phase that will be me that owns that story, and I'm going to be stronger.
Yes.
And
potentially help others.
Yeah,
which I think
that's the bonus, isn't it? And you're right, because it's not about money. 13 grand is not going to motivate me.
That's working full time.
That's what I mean. It's not. And you're right. If one or two women in particular could look at my story, and perhaps, and it just makes me realise how global it is, these identity issues, this striving to be someone you're not. And that's what I'm trying to create, a bit of a bumbly character who's just desperate to get pregnant. In the case of my character, she wants to get pregnant because that's going to be the perfect solution to everything. The same way I thought my ex was the perfect solution to everything. He wasn't.
Yeah.
And I've had to grow and be my own person so that any future partner will not be put in that position by me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's interesting if you spend so long running away from like grief.
Yes.
But then at the end of the day, it's the only thing that helps. And it's like, I don't want to. And it's like,
I don't want to.
You have to, because it's the only thing that'll make you feel better.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't
and
want to do
ultimately,
it.
it's you befriend yourself, because that's your ultimate counsellor. I remember lying in bed after having a mastectomy, staring up at the ceiling thinking, and I'd have the family come and visit, and I'd need to see them and love to see them, but I also needed them to go so I could lie there in the room and stare at the ceiling and seriously make friends with myself in case I was dying, And I think that's almost the whole challenge of being alive, is actually to love this person, because they're the only person you're going to sleep with.
Correct. To wake up with. And
all of your life.
Correct.
And they're the only person who you can guarantee will be there when you die.
Yeah.
It's an important mission.
My auntie always says that. She says, at the end of the day, Kate, we're all alone.
She's just had breast cancer,
Yeah,
so she's gone through that. Yeah. Sometimes I almost miss that feeling of thinking I'm going to die, because every day is so magical. It shimmers. You walk down the street and every encounter is so important, because it might be your third to last encounter. And, the trees, the nature, everything. And if you could live like that every day, live like you're dying, it's fantastic.
We need a death wish or a disease, Tara.
You don't.
That's it's been such an inspiring conversation already. I love it, and it's this for us is a new experience. This whole podcast, this is us doing differently and living a bit like that, isn't it? Really, this is us just throwing it open. And
Tara's done that by coming along.
She's our first guest.
It's been nice.
So good. Should we move into the diagnosis phase?
Okay. Before we did that, there was a couple of bits of feedback that I wanted to share. Look, we are just so loving the feedback from people, and I can't believe within 2 days 45 people joined
like that.
our
podcast.
Facebook
group.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
and look,
we love
any feedback and those stars, we've got 5
Yeah, we've got I think about 8 reviews. On
Nine.
Okay,
Don't keep it up. We're counting.
Not that we're obsessed.
Yeah, very. And I love that Cindy in Canada has
Cindy's
set up her desk against the wall so she hasn't got a view, because I think a desk with a view is really distracting for a writer. And she's done that, and she's put up a Joanna cushion.
I saw that photo.
But look, we've had wonderful feedback from overseas. Edie Tassi, who's my Italian translator.
Oh,
She's
wow.
the most gorgeous woman.
Yeah.
And she's been listening to the
Cool.
podcast, and she said she's going to be running a course at something called the Happiness Academy in
Okay.
October,
Yeah.
and she's going to recommend the podcast
Oh
to
my
her
God.
people, because
Thank you. That's
it's
so
all,
amazing.
the whole theme of what she's going to be talking about is how writing can make people happier.
Right.
So I'm really thrilled with that.
That's amazing.
And I've got this rather stunning agent in New York who would never compliment you
Okay.
for no reason.
Yeah, I like those
She's
people.
so gritty, and she said, "You are so authentic and honest together that it's an enthralling listen." So
What a great word. Enthralling. I love it. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So
Yeah, no,
thanks,
it's been the
Anne.
same for me. I've had neighbours, a couple of women from my book club have like recommended the podcast on their own
Wow.
social media.
Wow, thank you.
I've
Just
had
big
cousins
thank
and
yous.
it's been lovely. People are listening and it's
So Tara, you better ask
amazing.
some of your friends too,
I definitely
because we
will.
want
Yeah.
some
yeah.
20-somethings.
I'll have to make sure I grab your Instagram.
There's lots of young authors out there that are doing interesting things.
Yeah.
And experimenting with poetry and all kinds of stuff. So it's nice to see that it's changing.
Yes,
and
it
how it
kind of
evolves.
has to.
Definitely. So yeah, do you feel, Helen, that you need to give any of us either
Oh,
of us a
well, look,
diagnosis based
honestly,
on this?
you have both reduced me to silence through most of the session today, because you have both told your stories so beautifully and with such truth that I thought my main task was really to just sit and listen, and actually to listen and to be thoroughly present has been my honour today.
Aw,
Thank you.
Helen.
Yeah, I know, we're going to get really good now. But yeah, but thank you, honestly, because
So,
I
yeah.
feel like you sharing your story with us today has been, I can feel a real flow-on effect of feeling a bit brave.
Good, that's
And
what I was
ownership.
hoping for.
Good,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you've infused me just by
That
having
was-
Tara here.
That's
So thank
exactly
you.
what
I really
people
appreciate it.
are
And that's
looking
a strength, that's a power. And especially as a younger person with beautiful skin, you've got that power. I'm 40, like I'm just stepping into this now. So if you're stepping into it in your late 20s, is it
Yeah.
late 20s? I mean, that's awesome. You're
is.
awesome? That's
Oh,
an okay word. No, I think
dollar.
that's not official yet.
Oh.
Is awesome in it? It was amazing. That was in
No,
it.
but one of our
Oh,
listeners.
it's probably going to be.
Yeah,
all
I
right.
think that's
Sorry,
$1.
it's not awesome. It's inspiring.
Inspiring.
It is inspiring.
That's going to be the next word.
I know.
We'll
We'll
just say
just have tape on our mouth.
It'll be a silent podcast very
Exactly,
soon.
it'll be like,
and
No. But yeah, but that is very exciting, and I will make sure we connect listeners to you or whoever, because people might want to follow your story. I nearly said the J word, and hopefully there'll be ways in the future that whatever you produce, whether it's art or.
I'll keep
Please keep us posted.
Yeah.
do. Please do.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be good. I mean, great. I don't know, I'm really exhausted.
It'll be a fantastic journey, lovely, amazing,
Oh,
and
gosh.
awesome.
Now, a quick little thing just to finish up. We've been doing a little thing at the end called Planet Social, because for work I do social media marketing for businesses. I left advertising a couple of years ago. I just wanted to quickly touch on one thing, which was I did a presentation yesterday to a group of wedding industry people in the
There you
Mornington
go,
Peninsula.
Tara.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all lovely. I've done it twice now.
Do
That
they
was my
operate
second
an
time.
Uber?
I bet you they do. If they're smart, they could. So yesterday I presented on Instagram because people have been panicking about, Instagram engagement's down and the likes have disappeared and what's going on. And my basic summary yesterday was that don't panic. It's all these platforms are still, we're at the behest, is that the right way to say it, of what happens with these platforms when they get more popular. Things change and algorithms are introduced, and sometimes it's frustrating, but I was basically saying, keep on, connecting with people, because that's what it's all about, basically, is connecting with your desired audience. And the one message I guess I would wanted to share with our listeners is to consider stories, because yes, apparently according to some studies, Instagram engagement in the feed is down by about 18%. Someone's done a study. However, stories are growing 15 times faster than feed posts.
But
So
don't stories disappear in 24
they
hours?
do, but that makes them lusciously
That's so
spontaneous.
tiresome. Can't they just hang around?
They can. You can put them in your highlight reel.
Oh,
I'll have to show you how to do this.
show
I know, it's okay. But that was my message was, yes, while engagement is down in the feed, it's certainly not down in stories, and beyond that, it's definitely not down in IGTV, which is the next kind of level of Instagram video. And I guess the general message is video, video, video. That is very much what people are consuming. So, you know, video, maybe storytelling, it goes really well. Doesn't it? I mean, I think people are just used to now consuming more and more
But also
information.
meet some real people and look into their eyes and see the story that's behind their eyes.
Well,
and
that's true.
if they want to share that with you, encourage that to come out, because there's nothing that beats that.
No, I agree. I mean, the scale of video, like when you think of, I think MIF's on at the moment, isn't it? Or soon, Melbourne International Film Festival. That to me is storytelling through scale, because you've told the story beautifully on film. People can all assemble and watch it, which is great. But you're right. I think eavesdropping in cafes, which is one of Helen's pastimes, is a good way to hear stories. Get out into the cafes. I think you're right. It's a mix of online and offline. But yeah, that was the main point, was that stories are not, you know, stories are a good place to check out, to be in Instagram land. So that is really that. And I think that's pretty much it. In terms of, yes, the Facebook group, we're very excited to invite anyone who's a listener to join. All you have to do now is search Novel Therapy Podcast in Facebook and make sure you're searching for a group. If it doesn't come up, you just have to request to join and we will absolutely usher you into the group. 46, I believe, growing strong. Mostly people that we know, but it'd be nice to have some new people in there. So jump in there, because we're going to try and be very diligent about popping all links in there. It's all in one place. It's a bit easier. We'll make sure we put all our own social other accounts in there, but at least it's in one spot, so I don't have to read out the big long list now from last week. And that was about it, really. Other than that, I just wanted to say my official word count is 6,422. For those
so
keeping track.
I'm hoping that next week maybe you'll start reading us some of your work.
Yes, and of course when Helen suggested that,
She
cracked
froze.
my dad.
Yeah.
That
sounds terrifying.
Yes. Thank
Well,
you.
isn't that what it's all about?
Yes.
Yeah. That's the best. I think that's the best way to engage with people. So the story that I wrote, I ended up performing live on stage for the first time to an audience of like 500 people. And I remember standing on the side of the stage and being like, oh God, I really wish I'd picked something less personal. And Maeve Marsden, who's the host, was like, too late now, and just like gently pushed me onto the stage.
Wow.
So you have to do it. It's
Where was that? What was it, at a festival?
so that's at Queer Stories. I should probably mention.
Yeah,
Queer Stories.
we'll put the link in.
Hashtag that in.
Yeah, so that's
Because we're queer friendly here.
yeah, well, it's a beautiful
Absolutely.
storytelling night. So I think like a big part of it is believing in the power of stories. So a lot of it is like Maeve's brilliant. So she carved this night out, which is just like a space for LGBTQI plus people to share stories about their lives. It's not all just about coming out to all kinds of
just
stories.
whatever's they want to share.
And you go and you laugh and you cry together, and then she puts it on the podcast. And it's been going for a couple of years now, but it's been massively popular.
Okay,
not
wonderful.
surprised.
So could we share an audio of your story?
Yeah,
Red?
it's on the podcast. I think I'm like number 115 or something.
Okay, we will seek you out.
Yeah.
We'll put the link in so people can listen. Oh, that'd be wonderful. I can't wait to listen. I'll
Yeah.
listen on my
Well,
morning
thank
walk.
you.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. That is really brave. And yeah, I'm going to do a mini version of that next week.
Yes.
Do it. I cannot recommend. It will make
Okay.
your writing much stronger.
All right. I'll take the brave vibes from you and I'll do it, Tara.
Good.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Good.
So Tara was my medicine today.
Tara is the diagnosis. She's the medicine. It's good. I've been infused. It's
Thank you.
great. It's fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's about it. Unless anyone's got any last thoughts or shout outs, no other recommendations, anything else?
Jonah's gone.
Jonah's, being a bit too cool. There's a
Yeah.
cool photo I'll share in the group of Jonah. Literally was the receptionist today. He just had a real look of, you may pass, didn't he? He was out there.
Gave
so-
me my guest pass.
Exactly.
Checked everyone in. Yeah.
Your lanyard.
That's it. All right. Well, we will end it there, and thank you again, Tara, for being our very
My
first
pleasure.
guest.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
That was
Wonderful.
awesome. Thank you. All right, and we'll see/hear. No, you'll hear us next time. Yeah. So bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.